Looking back, this exhibition marked not only the beginning of a more than 25 presentations of Chinese architectural practices at Aedes, but also the start of a remarkable long-term cultural observation between Europe and China. The exhibition, A Structure of Feeling, we opened today, thoughtfully curated by Chris Gao and Li Xiangning, wonderful and amazingly smart designed, offers a compelling cross-section of contemporary avant-garde Chinese architecture. Not a retrospective at all, but again, 25 years before, a look ahead. It presents the work of a confident younger generation that approaches the future of architectures, cities, and society with optimism and imagination. My sincere thanks goes to Chris Gao, all the participating architects, and the exhibition supporters for making this outstanding contribution possible. Particularly in these times of geopolitical tension, open dialogue and the exchange of experience remain essential. They foster understanding, create trust, and offer perspective beyond simplified political narratives. All the more reason to continue observing these transformations with curiosity, openness, and a commitment to ongoing exchange. Thank you.
Well, I would like you to sincerely take this chance to thank you. 25 years ago, here the first group show of contemporary Chinese architects appeared here. So out of that group of architects, you know, when they were very unfamiliar to the European architecture circle, it's, you know, a time for us to go to look back to that part of history and to compare this group of we call it the new generation to the last generation. So we hope that in another 25 years, it's another generation. In the United States, there is an award called the Architecture of 25 years. So when a building was built after 25 years, it has been used and checked and approved to be a good or bad architecture. Then we could take that long time to think about its quality. And another thing I want to say here, as 2 days ago, I was giving a lecture at the UIA Congress in Barcelona on a special session, architectural pedagogy. So these days, among many Chinese architectural schools, we were doing like a digital futures and 3D printing, and we were also doing a laboratory on how to build on moons and Mars. We look at the soils on the moon and try to do a 3D printing out of that. So this kind of thing. But sometimes we forget at the moment when AI is a huge challenge, what is actually very important, what's the essential elements of architecture? It's actually feeling. It's associated with the human feeling. So that's why I'm very glad that Chris and Hans-Jürgen decided to use this title, The Structure of Feelings. So it's still architecture is still, beside all those artificial intelligence and the 3D printing thing, we still have the human feelings that we can, smell, we can look, and we can also touch. Sometimes we taste, we lick, and we taste the materials of architecture and have a best, deepest feeling in your heart. I think this is also no matter how many different new technologies and how far it goes, still at the very heart of architecture, the feeling human beings is still very essential. I think we architects, we always will remember that. This is also the experience from us, from the Chinese side of architecture. Thank you very much.
From Shanghai. I'm very happy to be here and honored to be here to present the opening of our exhibition, Structural Feeling. I would like to use the Chinese title like 水土 because it's a story tracing back to 25 years ago called 土木. And now we have this kind of a change rapidly in China in the past decades. And now we are very welcomed to the new generation of Chinese architects. They are not very young; it's just a little bit young. So some of them are here. And first of all, I need to thanks to Hans Juge and our colleague Aedes, who made all the things happen. They come to me and ask if we can do a exhibition like this. I say yes, why not? And we make it. And also, I need to thanks to our neighbor who make this very brilliant stage for us, and also we become a very good neighborhood. And the second, I would to thanks to the architects who come to here. Actually, in the exhibition, we have 9 architects got involved. They are mostly of the students of Chumu architects, or worked for them, or graduates from the school from there. So we can see the connection and the future. And the 7 of them come to here, already give us a lecture yesterday. And at the end, I need to thanks to my team and my wife who designed the expecting system. Actually, she used it to design airport for more than 10 years. Now she comes just to design a books. I need to thanks to her. And at the end, I think I need to thank all of you for coming here to look into the Chinese. We come from something object to conditions. So this is also why we have this title. I invite you come to China and look into what is happening here. Thank you so much.
Founding partner of the Rome-based practice Spazi Consonanti. His research explores heritage theory, contemporary architectural practice in historic context, and interdisciplinary approaches to the built environment. Jacobo, the stage is yours.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so glad to be here again. And last time I was here, I was with my, it was in my friend Chris Hess's show, and it was like first time I was there. I was here, and it's good to be here again. And with the all the speakers in this room, their photos on the wall, and you know, which includes my professors, Labius Woods, Raymond Abraham. So coming to here is like you know, a dialogue in through time with the Tumu show 25 years ago, and also with all the professors that has lead us, guide us through this journey of architecture. Thank you. So I would like to present the project Dali Transformer Theater for us. I'll make it easy. It's me and my partner here, Xiaojun Bu. He's actually a graduate from Tsinghua University, bachelor and master in Tsinghua University, and bachelor and master of architecture 1 in Harvard University GSD, and he used to work for SOM. And afterwards, he worked with me, and we founded Atelier in 2009 in New York. And then we have won a series of cultural projects afterwards, and we've been focusing our most attention on the architecture projects. And me, myself, I graduated in the Cooper Union in 2006 and Harvard University GSD at 2008. I used to work for Atelier Raymond Abraham, RMJM, and I founded Atelier Auto Architects with Xiaojun Bu in 2009. So without further ado, let me just go directly into our project. Let me start with the site. So the site is, the project is sited between Erhai Lake and Changshan Mountain. It's abutting the central market at the edge of Dali ancient site Tado. The project transfer a transformer factory into immersive theater. The project's iteration through time are both historic, incident, and inevitability, inscribed in the site as its evolution from cultural institute to industrial plan and now back to cultural facilities, mirror a timeless urban logic. The theater and market has always been the twin anchor for civic realm. So as you can see, here is the Erhai Lake, and in the back is the Changshan Mountain. It's in a very special site. It's at the edge of the ancient citadel, 70 meters away from the ancient citadel, and it's the tallest building, 18 meters. So the only option we have is to do the re-inhabitation rather than doing a new building. And we're concerned about the subconsciousness of the city. As Floyd argued that the consciousness is the visible fragment, whereas the unconsciousness is the ground upon which the self is constructed. We believe the city possesses a subconscious memory of the past, projection into the future, and exists with both physical and metaphysical contexts. The subconscious reconciles architecture and city across past, present, and future. So when we talk about the project, we usually start with the interrogation of surrealism. From classical to Renaissance, modernism, structuralism, deconstructivism, architecture and art has evolved in parallel. But while art advanced into Dadaism and surrealism, architecture seemed to have stalled in Art Deco. Architecture seems to have, yet the surrealism persists in architecture discourse through visions of Raymond Abraham, Hans Holleins, Walter Pischer, Archigram, and the young Leon Carrier. Even though Raymond Abraham was my mentor when I was at Cooper Union, I didn't fully grasp his architecture thought in my youth. Only in recent years have I understood him through the lens of surrealism. But I guess I was deeply inspired by him. Subconsciously, I tackled the question of surrealism in architecture unintentionally and incidentally through a small cafe project many years afterwards. So at the beginning, we find it difficult to pursue surrealism in architecture. For surrealism, unlike modernism, does not possess a clear linguistic structure. As surrealism is more figurative, it's difficult to extract a standard spatial syntax from it. In the same way, modernism got translated into architecture, and easily we might fall into the dilemma of being too figurative. The theatrical district is an immersive and design and the immersive show. The Transformer Theater transcends this barrier through interdisciplinary work. Spectacle 2099, a play tailored to the space, is a dialogue between architecture and theater. So deeply intertwined as to be indivisible. The Transformer Theater departs from standard big box model, a topology which front of house, back of house, stage, and orchestra bit are carefully delineated yet function as a single mechanism. Due to the site constraints, it is built around several existing factory structures, transforming the typology from a self-contained theater into a theatrical district. Here, the runway is the original street, and the essential building becomes the venue for an immersive product. Spectacle and spectators coexist within a single space, both architectural and theatrical, and simultaneously auditorium, setting, stage, and social mediums. The project operates across disciplinaries, architecture, stage design, new media, custom prompts, and music, all developed in dialogue through the syntax of space and time. The process is receptacle. Each discipline inspire and push others. Architecture often takes first move offering theater a reading of narrative, spatial feel, and trigger, in turn, the theatrical structure radically reject the architectural logic. We aim to revolutionize the show through a non-linear view of audience-chosen trajectory, and in parallel, to define the architecture through multiple perspectives on spectacle and spectator. Wittgenstein, the constructed reality. In creating the show, we realized that orchestrating multiple reality might be the path to architectural surrealism, a parallel reality generated through media and the theater is layered onto the physical. As this reality coexists, overlap, merge, permeates, and continue negotiate. Visitors find themselves at the threshold of reality and illusion, where perception is distorted, extended, and enriched by municipality, and where they are invited to pause and reflect upon their own personal reality. Illusion intensifies reality. Theatrical reality is not given, but negotiated through experiencing the architectural reality, which resonates with Wittgenstein. Reality is not found, but made. Cutting through the section of life. Dali is known for romance and scenery, but the transformation factory is different. It's a different heritage, industrial and raw. The project digs into Dali's industrial fragments, searching for the consciousness and desire beneath. The size industrial relic, oil tank, too, iron well, possess a dark beauty of metal against concrete, and reserve the conventional aesthetics. This records Baudelaire, who built his modern aesthetic through paradox, finding beauty in the original, the ordinary, the industry. The assembly hall is to become a transformer theater. The project replicates its orthogonal frame through strategic incision, cut in act by light, but by time, history, urbanism, and contemporary. This fragmentation reorients perception material, a surreal field where old and new negotiate across temporalities, and visitors become the author of their own urban spectacle. The assembly hall's architectural language exposed concrete frame, repetitive base, industrial fenestrations had already passed from utility to symbol. It signifies not production, but its memory. History here has been centralized, theatricalized, as Derrida observed through difference. The single yell only an illusion, never the thing itself. The column and truss still stand, but within the scene, the new cultural program. They function as illusion, signifier of past detached from present use. There's architecture language of building too is no longer bound to its industrial origin, but has expected yet logically transformed into spatial armature for an immersive theater. The Garden of Desire, DNA double helix. The Garden of Desire, a slowly rotating, upward spinning installation transmission butterfly into flower, and a hemorrhage told Baudelaire's The Flower of Evil. The narrative centers on metamorphosis of a surreal condition echoing Picasso's painting, where figurative and abstraction converge in a cubist spatial temporal framework. We synthesize cubist logic with a digital paradigm of metamorphosis, responding to human-machine dialect of the digital age. The Heartbeat Arena. In the arena, the show climax, Capital 5 factory base, reserve engineered from impossibilities. We suspend 5 ice screen box from still operable cranes. Okay, just flip through. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
too big or too fast. Today, it seems that it's still very speedy, but conditions seem to me are changing, and architects also trying to find new modes how to design. And I think this is an interesting aspect, which is on one hand catching up with elsewhere in the world, where speed is not the first thing, and on the other hand, also that a new kind of quality is coming out of these projects, which have a direct impact on neighborhoods where they are built and where they are embedded. And I think these aspects have been forgotten for a long time simply because it was not possible to do these big projects under these new conditions. Thank you.
So, thank you. So now I'm addressing what Adrian said. I'll say
A response to what you've seen, but also if you want towards.
okay, to be very honest with you, I'm a little bit overwhelmed because this was like 1.5 hours of I think maybe around 60, 70, 80 projects. So I don't really know what to think now, to be honest. So that's my feeling. I don't know. I mean, maybe the audience can also give me a smile if they feel a similar way, that they're kind of like pressed on the amount of projects which are going on in China. I think some of these projects we have seen are probably already in place for a couple of years, maybe 2 years, 3 years, something like that, I think. Yeah, and I have to agree, looking back to Tumu, which was 25 years ago, these projects look very, very different from, let's say, when we started looking at projects which were built on this kind of level in China. I think what I would like to point out is one thing which I believe is quite important is that we as firms practicing in China are still we still have the necessity to collaborate with local design institutes if we don't have the license or if we don't carry the license ourselves. So, which means that we are still depending, there's still a dependence existing, and we are not really free in the way it might look in this evening. But I do think that there is an ability which can be seen now that we find our way. I mean, I include myself because I'm also practicing in China, obviously. But I don't know if the conditions are more difficult now or actually, in fact, easier. That's mainly a question also to the others. I don't know. I think opportunities are still available, and also technology is developing. So I don't think we have a lot of opportunities also to bring this even to another level.
I have to agree with Linke that this is quite some fireworks of very heterogeneous projects, forms, typologies, etc. approaches. But when I kind of zoom out and look at that collection of interesting projects, I had the feeling, looking at the questions that young independent practitioners in China are facing, basically we've heard them all, right? I mean, the urban-rural sort of divide, the questions about social and environmental issues, questions about adaptive reuse, like how do we deal with the existing, etc., etc. Looking at them, at these questions, I have a feeling that it's actually not so different from the questions that German or European or let's say Western young independent practitioners are facing today, right? Maybe the answers are different. Maybe that's something we should discuss, right? The responses to these questions. But looking at the set of questions, it's actually very similar.
I think if we discuss the issue of production, I think it's all been said. But if we address the question of what is the direction of architecture in China, I think it's interesting to note that the variety or the heterogeneity that was just mentioned is in fact a desire of the clients, the government, to show that China is actually very open. I think that's one particular thing to take in, to realize that the same way as the French in the 1980s were interested in high-tech architecture, because I think the French felt very inferior in terms of technology. I think sometimes you see cultures deliberately pursuing a certain direction in order to compensate for what you could say is kind of a proliferation of generic commercial architecture, which is the background that I think was shown briefly, that the actual quality of 99.9% of the work in China is rather mediocre, if not to say poor. And it's a mimicking of what Chinese believe to be an ideal, in other words, to reproduce the United States, both in terms of urban design as well as architecture. So there's that aspect in the cities. And then when you see a lot of the rural projects, you notice that there is greater aspiration to be different, to create, as one of the architects was saying, Instagrammable image explicitly, and that that you have to provide that one way or another. So there is this dilemma, which of course you feed a monster. It's called tourism, and you then end up with over tourism, and you feed it with Instagrammable images that somehow are constituted by architecture, right? And that's kind of a paradox. And the pretense of saying, we have to protect our environment, we have to protect the glaciers and so on, and then we traffic more and more tourists to these areas. It's just the kind of dilemma, or the kind of hypocrisy of our times. And I don't blame the architects coming involved in that, but it's you serve a monster, and you end up with climate crisis, right? Or you are in the midst of climate crisis. So, yes, the question returns: what is the identity to which architects in China are striving? And I would say that Wu was clearly trying to translate from a traditional reading of art and architecture into something that would be kind of an abstraction of ancient culture, ancient Chinese culture, to something now where you could say, well, the influence of Zaha Hadid, of Frank Gehry, of Omei, and all those people have shown that, yeah, you can do that. You can do anything. You can do any shapes, you can do any kind of helix and that kind of stuff. And that's okay, right? So this is the condition that I think a lot of young practitioners are in. But perhaps in 10, 15 years, they will return to the question, what should we be doing in the future, or what should we have done in the past?
Thank you all for this first round of answers. And I want to borrow a little bit from each of you in addressing the first of the targeted questions. Because the aspects that you singled out, each of you, are quite different and build up a complex picture. And so the question is, how do you tell a story of that picture? In a way, if we speak to the the exhibition that is not in the room, if we speak to this interlocutor at 25 years of distance to me, it seems to me, but I might be wrong, that the stakes were pretty clear. There was an unknown. This field of practice that was emerging in China was an unknown. And it was about excavating and bringing this unknown to light. Right now, not only there are similarities in the problems that are faced or in the strategies that are adopted. But it feels like this world of Chinese architecture, up to a point, is part of the global currency. There are still opacities in this supposed transparency, right? So it's not so clear as one might think just by looking at the picture. So the moments, the stakes that are in place when thinking of how to do an exhibition about this are very different. How would you define this difference in the stakes between an exhibition about Chinese architecture from what you see today and the one that you had to face 25 years ago with Tongji?
I mean, first of all, everything was different. Communication was by fax machine. Yeah, I mean, of course, we also used email, but we could not transfer any files, you know, so it was simply too big. And so, if there was a problem, and there were many, to set up this exhibition, we had to call the people on site and negotiate how to continue. And of course, when we started, when I was in Beijing 1999 at the UIA Congress, a lot of books have been published on Chinese architecture. Each state-owned company published 2-3 books on their recent projects. And if you look at these books today, it's amazing. You know, it's so unbelievable because they all use computers already, whereas we here in Germany were still on the drawing board. You know, I mean, the computer was used to write something, but it was only starting, you know, to use CAD as a means for setting up plans. And the selection of architects was also, of course, not that easy because there was no forum where you could really look at and say, okay, we have here 20 practices and then we select 5 or 10 for an exhibition. So we relied very much on people in China, which we asked, you know, could you recommend someone? And then we went there and had a look, you know, so in some cases, we said, you know, the architects are not that bad, but we want to show something different. So the process of selection was very clear that we wanted to show something different to the bigness and the speed that was involved in the state practice. And I think that this makes a huge difference to what we see today. I mean, the internet is flooded with images of Chinese architecture. And so it becomes, I think, even more difficult, you know, to make selections and to find a topic on which to focus. And back then, in this aspect, it was easier, you know, because the selection was much smaller and you couldn't really find so many practices which were already at the start and had really built something, because this was one of the big conditions of us, you know, that we only show things which have been built and not renderings. Because renderings we could see so many and we were so bored at the end, so that we said, no way, you know, it has to be built, and if possible, we really want to see it. And I still remember, you know, Wang Shu, he just had finished his very first building, which was a white box floating above the water, the absolute opposite of what he did later. And so we asked him, how do you come to do such a white box, no context at all? And he confessed, you know, that he had a magazine, an American magazine of Heiju. And this had such an impact on his design that the outcome was this library. I mean, this is unbelievable today, you know, that a single magazine has such an impact. And but this was the way how young architects in that time who could not study abroad got their information. It was simply by a few accidentally found magazines of Western developments. And I think this really has completely changed. And with all the social media, this is a story of the past.
The next question is not scripted, but in a way it comes from your answers, both I think and Erhard, to the first round of questions. Because both of you have both an experience as educators and practitioners as Westerners. And it was interesting to me how, being in a way, you underlined how there is a contextual difference. So, like the problem of the Design Institute, not being, that was something that also Jürgen raised in his presentation. While you here, you were showing the similarity of problem. You are stressing on the similarity of problem rather than on the difference. And I'm guessing the question that I would like to ask you is, first of all, given the temporal perspective that your engagement in China has offered, which changes have you seen as architects working in China? And whether you think it is more relevant to stress on the similarities or to kind of make clear the differences in a way, or balance of both?
What was the first question? Because I focus on the second.
Yeah, of course. The first question is, having had an engagement over 20 years as a practitioner and also an educator in China, what kind of how would you describe the change? What happened over 20 years?
Okay, well, that's a big question. So I moved to China. I think it was 2002. That's early. So that was obviously a different time, as we just also kind of already figured out. And there was obviously a boom at the time, and a lot of stuff going on. Olympic Games started, of course. So I think obviously kind of know, we have some knowledge about it. I think what changed is that it became, just building became, as a practitioner, I would say, more normal in the sense, if you compare yourself having an office, let's say in Germany, where you have to work hard to get jobs. So you need to work harder, I believe, to get project today in China than it was in 2002. I think all of us could agree on this. So that's one thing which changed, like from a practical point of view. And I think what also changed is maybe the amount of money you can get now, or how to get the money. So maybe you have to fight harder to actually get paid, because I think the morale of payment is just not very positive at the moment. That's also, I think, what it is, like really practical points. But I would like to point out what didn't change so much is the different contexts we have. So we are here, like now, we're in Berlin, we're sitting here, and we are kind of in our head, we have our, let's say most of us are Germans, we have a German way of seeing things maybe. And I think what lacks is the possibility to understand the Chinese context in a better way. Because that's still, I've lived, or I've been there for 20 years, more than 20 years. And for me, I believe I have some understanding of the Chinese culture. And the culture and the context is very much related to the architecture we have seen today. And I do believe that we need to focus on understanding this better in order to also have a better connection. That's kind of a little off the question, but I still think it's important. Second part.
So I designed my first project in China 22 years ago, so quite a while ago. And I think in those days, if it comes to engagement of Western architects, and by the way, I would identify as 50% Western. So the way Western architects were engaged was very clear. I mean, it was more of a basically importing experience, I would say, right? And I think that obviously has shifted a lot, right? I mean, from a sort of one-way relationship, I think we end up now having a two-way, a more elaborate modes of exchange, two-way relationship, obviously. Why? Maybe, I mean, if you look at the biographies of our talk of our speakers tonight, many of them actually were educated abroad, right? So I think that's maybe one reason that there's an influx of let's say so-called Western architectural mindsets. So there's no need for importing any experience anymore in a way, right? And then of course, I mean we have had two Pritzker Awards in the meantime. From China, so there's obviously also a big change in terms of how Chinese practitioners are actually very active actors in the global debates in architecture, right? So I think that has changed a lot.
There is one in reading the exhibition text that Gao Changjun came up with to describe what was the ethos and the logic behind a structural feeling. There is one passage that is perhaps the one that is most interesting to me, but it's also in a way the most puzzling. And it's about when you speak of constructing Chineseness, this idea of constructing, or if you want, reconstructing, rather than quoting historical elements, is something that is fascinating, but is in a way still mysterious, right? I understand from what Gao Changjun was writing that his point is that you can construct Chineseness if you respond to the local condition. But I also remember by reading, I don't know if Wilfred is aware of this, but I had a sneak peek at one of your essays that is going to be published in the Vital Architecture, the monograph of Li Xiangning. And there I found a different way of addressing the problem of constructing Chineseness. Not something that is, or perhaps not a different way, but a complementary way. Not responding to the local conditions as of the present, but also reaching to the past in a different way, kind of trying to go back to something that is more than the motif, the historicist motif that has run its course, as Gao Changjun says. I was wondering if you could tell a little bit more about that, and also in a way that I think it's very pertinent to what we have seen in some of the projects.
Well, I mean, one of the leading exponents of thinking about contemporary definition of what a Chinese architecture could be without doing the kind of motival import of decorative sloping roofs and that stuff. Although he also does that. I'm thinking about Wang Shu. Wang Shu has set himself up as a model for how to read Chinese culture, from calligraphy to poetry to painting and to landscape architecture, and how to translate that into his buildings. And I think the most sophisticated translation to date is the National Archive of the printed book in Hangzhou, which, if you look at on plan, it's three parallel buildings, exhibition buildings. It was terribly boring. And it's connected by these bridges at various levels. But when you go there, I mean, it has a quasi-traditional park as well. But when you go there, you understand that what he's done is to three-dimensionalize the Chinese courtyard garden into a museum structure in a way that transforms the experience into a three-dimensional experience. And I think that is an incredible synthesis of decades of studies Which, it's interesting that many speakers also talk, speakers today talked about historical and influences from painting and so on. Just to point out that long scroll painting that with this kind of fluorescent green and blue represents the hunting park of one of the earliest emperors of China that was founded 1500 before Christ. 1500 before Christ. And that painting has been copied and copied and copied, and has formed kind of a matrix for landscape courtyard gardens, literally miniaturized versions. So, on one hand, Chinese architecture and Chinese courtyard gardens are stuck in the 1630 model of miniaturized courtyard gardens. And if I ever reproducing this kind of iconography, and the weaker architects tend to go to those kind of collections of motifs, and those intellectuals and those impressed by the idea of modernism and the idea of translation and abstraction, have made the effort to say, well, how do we actually translate all those picturesque, and I use that in a kind of a very positive sense, picturesque ideas into contemporary Chinese architecture. And I think that that's the most fertile direction in which one could say, you learn from the traditions, you learn from the kind of wealth of thoughts and experiences and so on, and then how do I do that in a single space, in a series of spaces, in an institution? And I think that I think when you have the opportunity to go to Hangzhou, you will see that archive indeed is a paradigm of how one could do it. It's not the only one, but it's one way of doing it. That is the Chineseness, if you like, in a modern sense, a synthesis of what is possible.
To close off, because we're already way beyond the schedule, I wanted to ask a question to Changjun. You will see in the exhibition preview that follows that the exhibition is described, and I quote, not as a panorama, but as a cross-section. And so my question would be, what next? An exhibition is a step one, right? Do you imagine that there's going to be more cross-sections that are added? Will it ever be solidified into a panorama? Will the sand set in this solution of the structural field?
I would say no. Yeah, because I like to do exhibition, I like to do creation. I take it like a practice also. Even I'm not at that yet, I think what we did is a kind of creation, but we're not looking into that specifically to the architecture, because all the participant architects here showing is all the good things. And I want to learn from the urbanism, from the mechanical, to see some hidden logic. I think sometimes, to me, architects are like outputs of the social logic. And you have roads, you have economic problem, you have different people, like we talk about Chineseness. I'm always thinking about, should I pretending I know how to do calligraphy? Or I like the traditional painting? No, because I don't have the memory, I don't train for that. I think different generation, especially in China, it's a huge country. We cannot just find a solution for every city. Maybe here is a solution for Shanghai, and we do success around 10 years, 12 years. And a lot of city government comes to us, success is a good way. Success is a kind of another event. It's like we spend another 2 years. And they come to us, if we can do another edition, maybe in Nanjing, in Chengdu, we all feel. Because we have the feeling
even in China, in different cities, in different area, we have the different time zones. This city is like 2026, the other one is maybe 2020, the other one is maybe 2002. So I think for me, a structure feeling is more like a free. We can use architects and architects to maybe like the extension we did, like building Shanghai. We use this kind of logic, language, and maybe also some architects to tell more story about how we become this. It's like how modern, when we become modern, and what can we go in the future. That is the most important part in my life up to now. Thank you.
So with the best possible closing, I want to thank all of the speakers here. I'm sorry, I have to ask for their forgiveness and the forgiveness of the audience, because also our conversation felt like a series of cross sections rather than a panorama. It was a bit disjointed, but as you can understand, the field is very broad, and it was worth kind of touching base a little bit on each of the aspects and let you fill in the gaps by watching the exhibition in person. Thank you very much for being here.